You guys, you're gonna have to tell me if I've got red lipstick on my teeth at any point in this video. If you don't, do I? Yeah? I'm gonna be very cross. You know, back in my day, which I don't even know what era I'm supposed to be from this time, so let me know in the comments. But back in my day, we were raised to appreciate the value of humility and hard work. And as I blossomed, if you can even call it that, from the little girl to the young woman that I am today, I learned a valuable lesson very early on. From our mistakes, we grow. But nowadays, it's a completely different story. All of those good old-fashioned values are getting thrown out the window in favor of what I like to call the Sussex syndrome. A terrible affliction that strips the infected of all insight and humility, replacing them instead with hubris and laziness. It's a very tragic state of affairs indeed, because without humility and insight that is required to acknowledge and work on your flaws, you'll never improve and grow as a person. How could you, when you are utterly convinced of your own perfection? Such is the tragic tale of the Duke and Duchess of victimhood, trapped in a world where everything is going wrong for them, but none of it is their fault. This video was inspired by a recent People magazine exclusive article, and a few paragraphs about the recent failures in La La Land not only particularly caught my eye, but made my eyes roll over so far back in my head that I saw my brain. But before I get to the meat and potatoes, it's time for the joke of the week. Get a load of this. Royal life wasn't a world they wanted for their family, says the Royal Insider, noting that their choices reflect that. Ah, I see. You know, you learn something new every day, and today is no different. Because it turns out that insisting on using titles that were bestowed upon you by a racist family, and then slapping said titles on your children, somehow qualifies as moving away from royal life. Ironically, this takes place pretty much a few days before the royal family updated, finally, its website and removed any references to His or Her Royal Highness in regards to Meghan and Harry. Now, people are saying, oh, they've been stripped of their HRH. I don't believe they've been stripped of it. I believe back in the Sandringham Summit, it was part of the agreement to put it in abeyance so they're not allowed to use it, which is different from stripping it of them altogether, but they have used it, as we know. I mean, most recently, Harry in his courtroom in the trial, when he failed to show up on the first day, had his barrister say, refer to him as His Royal Highness in the first instance, and then Prince Harry after that. So obviously, the HRH styling is very important to them, and I'm willing to bet that they're not all too happy about this update. It kind of reminds me of how Edward VIII basically chased after his family, telling them to style Wallace with HRH, and they refused to do so. It was his biggest gripe, one of the most long-standing problems that he had with his family, that he pretty much never let down almost until his dying day. So it's a big deal, I think, for these types. In another joke, Harry, who has absolutely all the respect in the world for his elders and his family and his countrymen, says this about Japan's culture, because, you know, he has so much in common with them.
Every single element of the Japanese culture is really unique and very, very special. I noticed it my first visit in 4 years ago when I came for the Rugby World Cup, and I would happily live here if you'd have me.
Yeah, something tells me that the Japanese are entirely too polite to tell him that his and his wife's attitude towards people, especially their family and their elders, won't exactly go down too well with their culture, where family and elders in particular are revered. Plus, Meghan couldn't even handle learning the British national anthem in English. She had to learn Japanese. I mean, that might just about finish her off. All right, so about a month and a bit ago, I released a video titled Why Meghan Markle's Archetypes podcast failed. And if you haven't watched it, then you can do so because it's detailed. But the TLDR version is because she's a lazy egomaniac. But of course, Meghan wasn't going to let Spotify and Bill Simmons and everyone else have the final say. So she did what she always does, recruited a source, probably also known as Meghan Markle, to talk to her favorite People magazine and tell them this. Warning, you may experience a severe case of deja vu. A source close to the Archetypes production says the couple was not set up for success on Spotify. They were given no formal lay of the land to kick things off, so they were already on unsteady footing even before the ink was dry. Basically the most predictable, quintessential Meghan and Harry response to yet another one of their catastrophic failures, to use their dramatic lingo. Where do I even start? No formal lay of the land, it's a podcast. They built a studio for them in their 16-bathroom mansion after paying them millions. And in another article, they blamed COVID for the lack of productivity on their end. And I'm just sitting here as someone who literally started posting on YouTube at the very beginning of the pandemic, at the height of it, and built this channel throughout, during the pandemic and beyond. And of course, I'm not the only one. Millions of people did the same, and some of them have been so successful that they now boast millions of subscribers and views. If anything, the pandemic was the best time to start a YouTube channel or a podcast, because never before in history, or at least not to this extent, were people forced, mandated to stay home. Consequently, having more free time on our hands than we knew what to do with. And then we hear this couple say that they were given no formal lay of the land, and that's why they failed, people. We've been too hard on them. I mean, cut them some slack. And it doesn't stop here. Though Archwell Audio produced just 12 episodes of Archetypes for Spotify, the source noted they have a lot of ideas and did pitch them, but said there was too much red tape between Spotify and the Sussexes. Things moved very slowly on both ends. I think they're really heavily relying on us having the memory spans of a goldfish, if that's even true, because I've heard that that's a myth. But point being, a 2-second memory span. Well, too bad for them, because I, along with many others, remember how hard Spotify tried to get something out of them. It was being reported on in the news. Spotify put out ads to hire people, a team, a production team, to work on Meghan and Harry's podcast for them, with them, who knows. Spotify were getting exhausted with them. Their patience was running thin. This was all circulating throughout 2021 and a lot of 2022 before Archetypes was eventually announced. And then even when it was announced, people were wondering, chief amongst them, Meghan's father, because he knows her best, whether this project will ever come to fruition at all. So we all know that Spotify tried very hard to get content out of them. And if they're going to count Harry's pitch of interviewing the Pope and Putin and Trump about their childhood trauma, I mean, he's not called the Duke of Delusion for nothing. See, the thing about us humans is we're pretty unstoppable when we want to be. But having said that, not all of us are blessed with tenacity and discipline, to make it to the places that we want to get to. But even so, Harry and Meghan practically won the lottery in comparison to the rest of us, at least on paper. You've got royalty and someone who's married into it. Who needs tenacity and drive and discipline when you have a royal title to open all kinds of doors for you and to garner the respect and attention of practically the entire world, simply by virtue of your existence. You've done nothing to deserve that. I mean, why else would Harry be getting paid a 7-figure salary at BetterUp, who have just recently let go of, I believe, 16% of their workforce, leading to disgruntled ex-employees basically saying that Harry's juice ain't worth the squeeze? And why else would Spotify have paid millions to the likes of Harry and Meghan and Netflix, only to let go of around 800 people, I believe, on Spotify's part so far? And these are hard-working people, people who actually had to put in the work to not only get hired, but keep working. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is happening because these 800 people weren't blessed with a royal title. And still they managed to mess up every opportunity that has come their way. I mean, somebody give these people an award for biggest royal F-ups. At least they deserve that one. You know, I was thinking about this. It's like success is literally allergic to these two. And this attitude of theirs, this forced martyrdom and victimhood and, placing the blame on everyone and everything but themselves, is why I am almost convinced, and I say almost because I can't predict the future, that Meghan and Harry will never know success. True success, long-term, consistent success. Because they refuse to acknowledge their own flaws, their own shortcomings, which means they'll never address them. They'll never fix them. They'll never work on them. In my past 10 years of coming into adulthood, I have been made aware of and have tried my hardest to fix so many flaws. We are all flawed beings. And to live a life like these two, where they're in their 40s and practically middle-aged, and still, what a waste of years that could have been put into working hard and growing as a person. And instead, they both choose to waste our precious time on earth, being convinced that everything they do is right. They are perfection personified, while the rest of us are getting everything wrong. I mean, I seriously don't know how Meghan went through 35 years of, her life with whatever minor successes she experienced with this attitude of hers. How did she get what little roles that she ended up getting? How did she start up and run the TIG for 3 years? Where did she find the persistence, the discipline? Because she's clearly severely lacking in it. It really explains why she didn't make it in Hollywood. I can imagine people were criticizing her during auditions, and I mean constructive criticism, telling her you need to work on this and that and that. And she just didn't take any of it on board. She never tried to improve herself because she thought she was perfect. After reading Revenge, clearly, she just wanted to be an overnight success without putting in any of the hard work to justify it. She just wanted to be Princess Diana 2.0, not realizing that Princess Diana actually took action and did things to earn that reputation. And this attitude continued with Harry when she met him. It's like they're actually a marriage made in hell, really, because they bring out the worst in each other. But they're very similar in that way. I remember feeling incredulous as I read Valentine Lowe's amazing book, Courtiers, where he detailed how the palace staff bent over backwards. They did everything they could to keep Meghan and Harry happy. And this includes the time before they were married, and I believe before they were even engaged. I made a whole separate video about that topic, by the way, when I read the book. So I will link it up here in the cards, and you can check it out after you finish this video if you haven't already. Because to quote Harry himself, it's a lot. And speaking of a lot, these two were given a lot of support from the very beginning. Support that they deliberately chose to ignore and squander. Support that many of us don't even get from our friends and families, those who are supposed to love us. And they were getting it from the best that the United Kingdom had to offer. And so as I was reading the book and as I was watching Oprah and as I'm sitting here today, just once again, considering how two people that were set up to succeed absolutely annihilated everything for themselves in record time. How could they do that? And the answer always comes back around to they refuse to see their part in their failures. And they've had a lot. And they're more than happy to claim ownership of their minor successes, if you can even call whatever they've done a success, because so far, anything that has given them relevance and money is a direct result of trashing their own family. I would call that an embarrassment rather than a success. But I like to think I have scruples and dignity, and I don't just sell my soul and sell my family just to get a couple of million or so. I mean, okay, a couple of 100 million or so, but whatever it is, dignity and decency and humanity are priceless. So, yeah, I mean, good luck to them. I couldn't even imagine living a life where there was nothing to improve. But they're not exactly the poster couple of happiness, are they? And now that they've supposedly moved on from their trash fest, of trashing their family, it remains to be seen whether their latest venture of turning what I think is a fanfic about them into a movie. But more on that later. I've decided to save a few topics for next week's podcast with Zach so that, we can have quite a bit to talk about. So hope to see you there. And until then, have a great weekend. See you later.